So let's get to a quick update on a story that we covered a few weeks back, a while back. You may remember that Florida Atlantic University had in fact sold the naming rights of its football stadium to a private prison company. That's right, they sold the name of the football stadium, the naming rights, to a private prison company, specifically the Geo Group. Well, Dave Zirin at The Nation magazine has a report on how a bunch of students at Florida Atlantic actually started a major protest campaign against their stadium being named for a private prison company, citing mainly the fact that the Geo Group profits off the racist incarceration of immigrants and Latinos that happens in Florida, that they're trying to actually expand even more. If more immigration law happens, what that probably means is more and more immigrants and Latinos are going to be getting arrested. Well, anyway, Florida Atlantic's mascot is apparently an owl, and so the students down there actually dubbed the protest Stop Alcatraz, which is pretty awesome, right? That's a good protest name. Alcatraz, actually calling the actual stadium Alcatraz. But guess what? Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Those students, those protesters, they stopped Alcatraz. They stopped Alcatraz from happening. They did it. The Geo Group has, in fact, withdrawn its name and its money because of the rightfully horrible PR they have been getting since they announced that they wanted to name the stadium after a private prison. So anyway, though, way to go, protesters and students down at Florida Atlantic. That's always good news. I always like reporting positive news. So that's the end of the positive news. We're going to get to the depressing news now. But we're going to keep with the sports theme here. I want to talk a little bit about March Madness, even though it's now April. Now, sadly, my hometown Creighton Blue Jays, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. They're one of the hometown teams there. They were ousted in the second round of March Madness. But what I really want to talk about here is something I'm sure a lot of you've seen, and that is the gruesome, horrific injury to Louisville basketball player, the guard, Kevin Ware. Again, as I've said, you've probably seen the footage, or if you haven't seen the footage, you've probably chosen not to watch the footage because it's been all over the internet, all over television, all over media. In a game against Duke, this poor kid, Kevin Ware, is playing, and his leg, when he goes up to block, his leg kind of, I don't know how to say it. It sort of rips out from under him. It is just horrible and horrific to watch. Now, the reason I want to talk about this, though, while this injury could and probably will end his basketball career, the reason I want to talk about it is it also could potentially put his college scholarship at risk. Now, my ultimate guess is that Louisville, the university, ultimately honors his scholarship and lets him keep it, because not doing so would be a PR disaster for the university. This is a really, really high-profile case. It was in an Elite Eight game there, so this is a huge story that's going on. So I think they'll probably not take his scholarship away. But the point here is there really would be nothing to stop Louisville from pulling this poor kid's scholarship. And because the fact is, countless other lower profile NCAA athletes actually do have their scholarships pulled after getting injured playing sports. This happens all the time in the NCAA. And that's because in most circumstances, scholarships for athletes in college are actually not guaranteed for a full 4-year ride at school. They're usually given out 1 year at a time, and they are renewed at the college's discretion on a year-by-year basis. So here's the deal, folks. The NCAA makes, over $770 million a year on broadcasting March Madness alone. That's right, $770 million a year just broadcasting the March Madness tournament. We're not talking about the rest of the season. We're not talking about jerseys. We're not talking about T-shirts. We're not talking about all the other tie-ins. We're talking strictly on broadcasting. The NCAA makes like $750 million right there. Now, CBS News is reporting that in the 2011-2012 academic year, which would be last year, Louisville, the school where the poor kid went to, Louisville actually reported that the Department of Education, the Department of Education, that the Louisville basketball team earned $42.4 million in revenue. And that's just men's basketball alone for 1 year in Louisville. And that's just Louisville right there, okay? So $42.4 million. So we're talking literally about billions and billions of dollars that are made off of college athletes. And other than non-guaranteed scholarships, these athletes receive absolutely no compensation. The truth is, by NCAA rules, they're not allowed to get paid for anything. They're not allowed to get paid from the jerseys that people sell. They don't get any bit of the marketing. They don't get anything of video games. You know, there's college basketball video games that use their likenesses. They don't get a dime from that. The players do not see a dime from anything at all. So reading from CBS News, a group called the National College Players Association, which is an advocate group. The National College Players Association found that, quote, the average football player at an FBS or football bowl subdivision is the highest tier in college sports. A FBS school had a fair market value of $456,612 above and beyond the value of their scholarship. The average men's basketball player had a fair market value of roughly, $1.6 million over 4 years, not including his scholarship. That figure is actually even higher at bowl championship series schools, where it's $714,000 for the average football player and $1.5 million for the average men's basketball player. End quote. That's from CBS News, quoting a National College Players Association study. So the study here, folks, it found that just counting football and basketball players alone, men football and basketball players, between a 4-year span between 2011 and 2015, these college athletes are being denied a minimum $6.2 billion. That's right, billion with a B, $6.2 billion. And not only are they denied financing and money off of their labor. Not only they're not being denied what their labor on the free markets, which is what we're supposedly supposed to have in America, free market, blah, blah, blah. Not only they're denied what their labor on the free market is actually worth, a lot of injured players are actually on the line for the medical costs of their injuries that they get playing sports. So in the case of Kevin Ware, the injured basketball player that we were talking about, Louisville has said that they will pay for his initial surgery and initial rehab, which they kind of have to. This is very high profile. They're not just going to say he's going to have to deal with it himself. But not all athletes are as lucky as Kevin Ware, as lucky as a kid who had his leg pop out. I know how that sounds. But when it comes to injuries and what they actually have to pay for their injuries, not all of them are as lucky as he is. There's so many stories out there of college athletes, blowing out a knee, having some type of big injury, and then getting stuck with medical bills for tens of thousands of dollars. Not even just for the injury beyond it, but for the initial injury. And so let's get back to Kevin Ware, though, okay? So Kevin Ware, the type of injury that he received, this brutal injury, frankly, that is going to be with him for the rest of his life. It is. It's going to be with him for the rest of his life. It's the type of injury that happened to his leg that can easily be re-injured just kind of walking down the street, essentially. When he gets older, this is the type of thing that has a horrible case of reoccurrence. Not that it's going to necessarily just like, pop out like it did, but it's something that has continual problems for the rest of his life. And, he's a kid right now. He's in his, I think he's like 20 or something right now. This is something that's going to be with him forever. So here's the deal, though. So while Louisville is paying for the initial surgery, after the initial surgery and the initial rehab, after he graduates from college, all of the costs that he's going to occur over the rest of his life, that's all on him. It is. It's all on him. And that's how it goes with college athletes in the NCAA. If they are lucky enough to get their initial treatment covered, if they're lucky enough to not have to pay for the initial treatment after college, these giant injuries do linger, and they often do. The truth is they are on their own. And so here's the deal. It's one thing for a professional athlete who's making $1 million up to tens of millions of dollars. It's one thing for a professional athlete who has a guaranteed contract, which professional athletes do, which are thanks to the athletes' unions and the strength of players' unions. It's one thing for professional athletes for them to be risking a lifetime of injury. That's one thing. But it's another thing for college students, for kids whose labor, and let's not kid ourselves here, whose actual labor is bringing the NCAA and these colleges and universities billions of dollars a year. It is a total different thing for college students who, at best, what they receive is tuition paid and a scholarship that is far below what their labor is actually worth on the open market. And again, we're talking about also a situation where these students have absolutely no guarantees. They have no guarantees that their scholarships will be honored. They have no guarantee of their health care being honored. They have no workers' compensation. If they get hurt and they're unable to, do anything, if they're unable to work, if they're unable to do anything, there's no workers' comp for them if these athletes are injured on the job. Because, being a air quotes student athlete, it's a job. Let's not kid ourselves here. They're not getting paid for a job, but the executives are getting paid. They're getting paid a ton of money, billions of dollars off of the athletes' labor, their actual blood, sweat, and tears, their labor, and they don't even get to see a dime of it. Seriously, this is a small problem. Hopefully, this injury will draw some attention to the horrible situation that goes on with student athletes out there. Because seriously, the NCAA is in desperate need for some serious, very, very serious reform.